Megan Reynolds clutched the steering wheel of her aging sedan, knuckles white as Wyoming prairies stretched endlessly before her. Boxes packed to the ceiling, clothes hanging from hooks, and houseplants wedged into remaining spaces transformed the car into a traveling storage unit that smelled of cardboard and desperation. She glanced at the rearview mirror, catching 8-year-old Lily's face peaceful in sleep despite the upheaval of recent months. Scout, their German shepherd, panted from the back seat nose, periodically pressing against the window when wildlife appeared in the rolling landscape. This was it, her last-ditch effort to rebuild their lives after the divorce and sudden layoff had left them financially and emotionally drained. The inheritance money from her mother Evelyn's estate had barely covered the down payment on this remote property site, unseen except for grainy online photos showing 40 acres and a weathered red barn. The GPS chimed that they were 5 miles from their destination, each mile marker, like a countdown to an uncertain future. The realtor had called it a unique opportunity for the right buyer. Translation, nobody else wanted it. But the price had been unbeatable, especially with land values soaring everywhere else. And Megan desperately needed a fresh start away from Chicago's constant reminders of failure. Lily stirred in the passenger seat, rubbing sleep-crusted eyes. "Are we there yet?" "Almost, sweetie. Look, I think I can see our barn from here." Megan pointed toward a splash of faded red visible against golden prairie grasses. Something about that old structure had called to her from the online listing, perhaps because it seemed as in need of restoration as she felt herself. Scout's bark echoed through the car as they turned onto a gravel driveway, stretching nearly a quarter-mile toward a modest farmhouse. The structure was simple white clapboard with a covered porch and stone chimney rising from the center of the roof. Behind it stood the barn, larger than it had appeared in photos, weathered red paint peeling to reveal silver-gray wood beneath. The car rolled to a stop, and for a moment they sat in silence. This was real now. No going back. "It looks like the houses in my storybooks," Lily whispered, awe mixing with uncertainty. "Does it have a princess tower?" "No princess tower, but something better: space for your very own art corner and a yard big enough for Scout to run for miles." Megan forced brightness into her voice despite the anxiety tightening in her chest. What if this was a mistake? What if she couldn't make the mortgage payments once the inheritance money ran out? What if Lily hated being so far from her friends? Scout bounded from the car the moment Megan opened the door, racing circles around the yard, nose to ground, tail whipping with excitement. At least someone approved of their new home. Lily followed, more cautiously, stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest as she surveyed the property. The house key turned stiffly in the lock, another reminder of how long the place had stood empty. Inside, dust and disuse hung heavy in the air, but beneath that, Megan detected faint scents of lemon polish and wood smoke. Someone had loved this house once. The furniture that came with the property was sturdy, an unfashionable plaid sofa in the living room, wooden chairs with woven seats around a kitchen table, beds with iron frames, and quilts that smelled of cedar. Evelyn would have approved of their practical simplicity. The thought brought a familiar ache, imodic. Nearly a year since Alzheimer's had taken her mother, and still Megan narrated observations to a woman no longer there. While Lily explored upstairs bedrooms, Megan stood at the kitchen window gazing at the barn. Something about its silhouette against the late afternoon sky tugged at her. Perhaps it was the potential she saw with work. It could become the pottery studio she dreamed of since college, before marriage and motherhood, and a marketing career redirected her creative energies. The severance package from her former employer had included enough for a kiln and basic equipment. Maybe here, away from pressures and judgments of her previous life, she could finally pursue the art that had once brought her such joy. Lily's footsteps pounded down the stairs, her face flushed with excitement. "Mom, there's an attic with a window seat. Can I make it my secret reading place, please?" "Of course you can. We'll find pillows to make it cozy." Megan smiled, relieved to see enthusiasm replacing the solemn wariness that had shadowed her daughter since the divorce. By sunset, they'd unloaded essentials and organized a simple dinner of sandwiches and fruit. Lily fed Scout while Megan unpacked kitchen necessities, familiar routines bringing comfort amid strange surroundings. "Can we explore the barn tomorrow?" Lily asked during bedtime, eyes heavy with exhaustion. First thing after breakfast, Megan promised, smoothing back Lily's curls. "Maybe we'll find hidden treasure, like in Grandma Evelyn's stories." A yawn punctuated the question. "Maybe." Megan's throat tightened. During her final months, Evelyn often drifted into storytelling, spinning tales about hidden boxes and secret messages that Megan attributed to Alzheimer's confusion. Grandma always said old buildings keep secrets. After Lily fell asleep, Megan sat on the porch steps, wineglass in hand, watching stars appear in the vast Wyoming sky. Scout lay beside her head on her knee, occasionally lifting it to track sounds. In the darkness, rustling prairie grasses, distant owl calls. The silence felt profound after years of Chicago's constant urban soundtrack. She thought about her mother's final month's hospital visits, the care facility, with antiseptic corridors, the slow erosion of memory that transformed a fiercely independent woman into someone who sometimes looked at her own daughter with polite confusion. Near the end, Evelyn became increasingly agitated, insisting on telling Megan about the baby in the barn and the girl who had to run away. The doctors explained it as typical Alzheimer's confabulation, the brain creating stories to fill memory gaps. But sitting here now with the dark silhouette of the barn looming beyond the yard, Megan couldn't help wondering if there had been something more to her mother's ramblings. Morning brought clearer perspective and practical tasks. After breakfast, Megan and Lily with Scout trotting ahead made their way to the barn. Massive wooden doors groaned in protest as Megan pushed them open, releasing scents of aged timber dust and something else, a faint metallic tang, reminiscent of her college metalworking class. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in golden beams. The interior was cavernous, a main floor large enough for several pottery wheels and work tables with a loft running along two sides. Tools hung from pegs on one wall, hammers, saws, wrenches most spotted with rust, but still serviceable. A pot-bellied stove occupied one corner beside it, a workbench with a vice grip attached. "This place is ginormous," Lily's voice echoed as she spun in circles, arms outstretched. "Can I have a corner for my art projects too?" "Absolutely." Megan's mind was already arranging the space pottery wheels near windows for natural light kiln, against the far wall shelving for glazes and tools display areas for finished pieces. For the first time since arriving, she felt genuine optimism. This could work. They could build something new here. Scout, meanwhile, had begun behaving oddly. The dog trotted methodically along the barn's perimeter, nose to floorboards, whining softly. Near the east wall, he stopped and began scratching at the floor nails, making distinctive sounds against wood. "Scout, stop that," Megan called, but the dog continued, movements becoming more insistent. "He found something, Mom." Lily hurried to Scout's side. "Look, this board moves." She pushed at the plank the dog had been scratching, and it shifted slightly, revealing darkness beneath. Megan knelt beside them, excitement mingling with caution. "Stand back, honey. Let me check if there's anything dangerous." She pried the loose board up with her fingers, revealing a small hollow beneath the floor. Inside lay an object wrapped in oilcloth fabric, stiff with age but intact. With careful movements, Megan lifted the bundle and unwrapped it. A wooden box, simple but beautifully crafted with brass hinges and a small latch. "No lock. Treasure," Lily breathed, eyes widening. "Just like Grandma said." Megan's pulse quickened as she opened the latch. Inside lay a collection of photographs, letters, and documents, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. She lifted out the top photograph, a sepia-toned portrait of a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with dark hair and hesitant smile that seemed oddly familiar. The woman wore a simple dress with sweetheart neckline and held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "She looks like you, Mom," Lily observed, peering over Megan's shoulder. She did in the way family members often echo each other across generations. But there was something else, a resemblance to someone Megan had known intimately. The woman looked remarkably like Evelyn had in her wedding photos, though Megan was certain this wasn't her mother. She'd gone through all of Evelyn's photographs after the funeral. Turning the photograph over, Megan found an inscription in faded ink, "Sarah May, 1984. Her breath caught. She'd been born in May 1985. The next photograph showed the same young woman standing beside a tall man with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. They gazed at each other with unmistakable affection. On the box, someone had written, "Sarah and Brian Morrison Ranch, Christmas, 1983. "Who are they, Mom?" Lily asked, fascinated by these strangers from the past. "I'm not sure," Megan murmured, though an uncomfortable suspicion was forming. She set the photographs aside and lifted out a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The top letter bore handwriting that seemed strangely familiar, flowing yet precise like her mother's had been, but somehow younger. It began, "My dearest Brian." And as Megan scanned the first lines, confusion bloomed into disbelief. This wasn't her mother's voice, not the practical, reserved Evelyn who had worked as an accountant and volunteered at the Methodist Church. This was someone passionate and poetic writing about stolen moments and a love that made the everyday world seem pale in comparison. Megan's hands trembled as she set the letter aside and reached for an official-looking document. A birth certificate for Sarah Emma Collins, born March 15, 1964. The birth date matched her mother's, but the name was wrong. Evelyn Louise Walker was what Megan had always known, yet the handwriting on the letters was undeniably similar to her mother's. Another document, a marriage certificate, but not for David and Evelyn Walker. This showed Sarah Collins marrying William Morrison in 1982, only to be dissolved a year later. Megan had never heard of William Morrison. Her father was David Walker, a quiet, steadfast man who died of a heart attack when she was 12. At the bottom of the box lay one final document that made Megan's world tilt on its axis: a birth certificate. Her birth certificate, but not the one she'd seen before. This one listed her mother as Sarah Collins and her father as Brian Stewart. May 5, 1985. "Mom, are you okay? You look weird." Lily's voice seemed to come from far away. Megan forced herself to breathe, focusing on her daughter's concerned face. "I'm fine, sweetie, just surprised by what we found." She carefully returned the documents to the box, needing time to process their implications away from Lily's observant eyes. "Let's continue our exploration. I think this barn has more secrets to share." To distract them both, Megan suggested they map the space measuring dimensions for her future studio. Lily enthusiastically embraced the role of assistant, holding one end of the measuring tape and recording numbers in a small notebook with careful precision. Scout, however, remained interested in the floorboards, continuing his methodical investigation of the perimeter. While Lily drew a picture of how she thought the studio should look, Scout's excited barking drew Megan to another section near an old feed trough. The dog was pawing at the dirt floor, which appeared softer than surrounding ground. "What is it, boy?" Megan knelt beside Scout, patting the earth. It definitely felt disturbed, as if someone had dug there and replaced the soil. Curiosity overriding caution, she retrieved a small spade from the tool collection and began to dig. About 18 inches down, the spade struck something solid. Megan carefully cleared away soil to reveal a tin box wrapped in oilcloth similar to the wooden one they'd found earlier, but sealed with wax around the edges. This had been buried with intention of long-term preservation. "Another treasure box," Lily exclaimed, abandoning her drawing to watch Megan extract the box from its hiding place. "Let's take it to the house," Megan suggested, suddenly aware of lengthening shadows in the barn. "We can open it after lunch." In the kitchen, with sandwiches finished and the tin box sitting between them on the table, Megan struggled to maintain casual demeanor for Lily's benefit. Inside, her mind raced with questions. Who was Sarah Collins? Why did she have Megan's birth certificate? What was her connection to Evelyn Walker? And most disturbing, had the woman Megan knew as her mother actually been someone else entirely? The wax seal crumbled as Megan carefully broke it, revealing another bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. These were written on heavier stock with elegant letterhead reading "Stewart Ranch" in embossed script. The handwriting was masculine, flowing but decisive, and the letters were addressed to "My darling Sarah." Megan read the first few lines, immediately drawn into intimate correspondence, revealing the depth of Brian Stewart's feelings for Sarah Collins. "I cannot stop thinking about our conversation yesterday. You are right that our situation is impossible, but my heart refuses to accept the logic of it. I know I have no right to ask you to wait for me, but I cannot imagine a future without you in it." Lily, bored with adult correspondence, wandered into the living room to arrange her stuffed animals on the plaid sofa. Megan seized the opportunity to scan through the letters more rapidly, piecing together a narrative that made her heart race. The letters spanned nearly 2 years, from early 1984 through spring 1986, documenting a passionate but troubled relationship. Brian wrote about his unhappy marriage to Rebecca, describing it as a union arranged by our families for business reasons rather than love. He spoke of Sarah as the light in my darkness, the one person who understands my dreams of modernizing the ranch and building something lasting. As correspondence progressed, the tone became increasingly urgent and worried. Brian wrote about pressure from Sarah's parents to end their relationship, about threats to both families' reputations, and about mysterious financial difficulties that seemed designed to force both families into compliance with someone else's agenda. I fear we are being maneuvered by forces neither of us fully understands, Brian wrote in a letter dated March 1985, 2 months before Megan's birth. Your father came to see me yesterday not with the anger I expected, but with the resignation of a man who has been given an ultimatum he cannot refuse. He spoke of debts that must be paid and consequences that would destroy both our families if certain arrangements are not honored. A letter dated just before Megan's birth revealed Brian's determination to protect Sarah and their unborn child. I have been investigating the source of these pressures, he wrote, and I believe I understand now who is behind our troubles. The Mountain West Holdings Company that has been buying up distressed properties in the county is not what it appears to be. I've traced its ownership through several shell companies, and I believe it is controlled by interests that have been manipulating land prices and creating artificial financial crises to acquire valuable properties at below-market prices. The next letter was more specific. My darling, I have discovered that Mountain West Holdings is ultimately controlled by the Pierce family out of Denver. Harold Pierce's father has been using hired agents to create scandals and financial pressures that force families to sell their land cheaply. Our situation is not unique. They have done this to at least 3 other families in the county over the past 5 years. Megan's hands shook as she neared the end of the bundle. The final letters revealed Brian's growing desperation as Sarah's pregnancy became too obvious to hide increasing pressure from both families to resolve the situation and his plans to expose the Pierce family's manipulations to state authorities. The last letter, dated May 1986, a year after Megan's birth, was heartbreaking in its finality. My dearest Sarah, by the time you read this, I will be gone. They have made it clear that my continued presence in Pine Ridge endangers not only us, but our daughter as well. I have arranged for Megan to be safely raised by your cousin Evelyn, where she will have the stability and respectability we cannot provide. I'm leaving evidence of the Pierce family's crimes with someone I trust. Someday when it is safe, the truth will come to light. Until then, know that my love for you and for our daughter will never diminish, regardless of the distance between us. At the bottom of the tin box, Megan found a small key attached to a piece of paper with an address in Denver, a safety deposit box at First National Bank of Colorado. Brian Stewart had hidden evidence somewhere, and he had left Sarah the means to find it. Megan sat back, mind reeling. The woman she had known as her mother, Evelyn Walker, had actually been Sarah's cousin. Her father wasn't David Walker, but Brian Stewart, a rancher who had discovered corruption and possibly been killed for it. And her biological mother, Sarah Collins. Where was she now? What had happened after Brian left? Had she tried to find Megan? Mom, look what I found. Lily's voice jolted Megan from her thoughts. Her daughter stood in the doorway holding an old-fashioned doll with porcelain head and cloth body. She was behind the bookshelf in the living room. The doll was clearly antique with faded calico dress and hand-stitched features. As Lily handed it over, Megan noticed something unusual about the weight, heavier than it should be, with odd firmness to the cloth body. Let me see her for a second, sweetie. Megan examined the doll more closely and discovered a small seam at the back that had been resewn with different colored thread. Carefully, she unpicked the stitches, revealing a hollow space inside. Nestled within was a folded piece of paper. Megan's heart pounded as she unfolded the yellowed note. The handwriting matched the letters from the box, Sarah's handwriting. If you're reading this, my darling daughter, find Ernest at the clock shop in Pine Ridge. He'll help you understand what happened to us. I love you more than life itself, S. What does it say, Mom? Lily leaned against Megan's chair, curious. It's a message from someone who lived here a long time ago. Megan refolded the note, mind racing. Ernest at the clock shop, a real person. She could talk to someone who might know what happened to Sarah and Brian. Honey, I think tomorrow we should explore the town. Would you like that? Can we get ice cream? Lily's priorities remained refreshingly uncomplicated. Absolutely. Megan managed to smile despite the turmoil inside. Ice cream is essential for proper town exploration. That evening, after Lily went to bed, Megan spread the contents of both boxes across the kitchen table, constructing a coherent timeline. Sarah Collins and Brian Stewart had fallen in love despite his marriage. Sarah became pregnant. Someone the Pierce family used this scandal to pressure both families, forcing them to sell land at reduced prices. Brian discovered the scheme and gathered evidence, but had to leave to protect Sarah and baby Megan. Sarah arranged for cousin Evelyn to raise Megan, perhaps to shield her from scandal or from the Pierce family's influence. But what happened to Sarah afterward? And why had Evelyn never told Megan the truth, even as an adult? Had her mother known? Her cousin been protecting her from something more dangerous than social stigma? A sudden noise outside startled Megan. Scout lifted his head from beside the sofa, ears alert. Through the kitchen window, Megan caught a brief flash of light near the barn, like a flashlight beam, quickly extinguished. Her pulse quickened. Was someone out there? She turned off the kitchen light to see better into darkness. For several minutes, she stood motionless, watching. Just as she began to think she'd imagined it, another brief flicker appeared definitely near the barnside entrance. Scout growled low in his throat, confirming Megan wasn't seeing things. Someone was on her property, possibly in her barn in the middle of the night. Should she call police? But what would she tell them? I saw a light and my dog growled. By the time they arrived from town, whoever was out there would be long gone. Instead, she grabbed her phone and a heavy flashlight, then checked that doors were securely locked. She debated waking Lily but decided against it. No sense frightening her daughter if this turned out to be nothing more than a curious neighbor or local wildlife triggering a security light she hadn't noticed. From the living room window, Megan kept watch for 20 minutes, but the light didn't reappear. Eventually, Scout settled back down, though he remained more alert than usual, eyes frequently turning toward the window. Sleep came fitfully that night. Megan's dreams, filled with fragments of letters, imagined conversations between Sarah and Brian, and shadowy figures moving around the barn. She woke before dawn, exhausted but too restless to return to sleep. While coffee brewed, she stood at the kitchen window, watching the barn in gray pre-dawn light. Nothing seemed amiss, but when she and Scout ventured out after breakfast, she found disturbing evidence that last night's light hadn't been imagination. The side door, which had been closed when they left yesterday, stood slightly ajar, and fresh footprints marred the dusty floor inside. Someone had definitely been in the barn, and recently. Megan's skin prickled with unease as she examined the area around the loose floorboard where they'd found the first box. The board had been completely removed and laid to one side. Whoever had been here knew exactly what they were looking for. Had they found anything else, Megan couldn't be sure. She and Lily had only explored a portion of the barn yesterday. There could be more hidden caches they hadn't yet discovered, and now someone else was looking for them too. The implications sent a chill through her. The letters were over 35 years old, but clearly the secrets they contained still mattered to someone. "Are we going to town today, Mom?" Lily appeared in the doorway, still in pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. Scout immediately trotted to the girl's side, protective as always. "Yes, after you get dressed. And Lily—" Megan hesitated, unsure how much to share with an 8-year-old. "I want you to promise me something. If you ever see any strangers around our property, come find me right away. Don't talk to them, just come straight to me." Lily's expression grew solemn. "Is this about the man with the flashlight?" Megan's heart skipped. "What man with the flashlight?" "I saw him from my window last night. He was walking around the barn." Lily spoke matter-of-factly, as if this were normal. "I thought maybe he was checking on animals or something." "Did you see what he looked like?" Lily shrugged. "It was too dark. He was just a shape." "Is he bad?" "Not necessarily bad, honey, just not invited." Megan forced a reassuring smile. "This is our home now, and people should ask permission before coming onto our property." After Lily dressed and they had had proper breakfast, Megan loaded them into the car for the drive to Pine Ridge. She debated bringing the boxes and documents, not wanting to leave such important discoveries unattended, but ultimately decided against it. If someone was watching the house, carrying out the boxes might alert them to their significance. Instead, she hid them in the attic space behind Lily's new reading nook. The town of Pine Ridge lay 15 miles east, along a winding county road. As they approached, Megan saw it was exactly the kind of small western community she'd imagined. Main Street lined with brick buildings from the early 1900s general store diner, advertising Mabel's Famous Pie on a sun-faded sign, post office that doubled as bus station, and handful of other businesses that spoke of better economic days in the past. The clock shop wasn't difficult to locate. A modest storefront with Morgan's timepieces, Sales and repairs since 1975, painted on the window in gold lettering. A bell tinkled softly as Megan pushed open the door, Lily's hand firmly in hers. The interior smelled of wood polish and machine oil with soothing background music of dozens of clocks ticking in gentle disharmony. Glass cases displayed pocket watches and wristwatches, while grandfather clocks and cuckoo clocks lined the walls. At the back, an elderly man in a jeweler's loupe bent over a workbench, gnarled hands steady as they manipulated tiny gears. "Be right with you," the man called without looking up. Megan took the opportunity to study him. He appeared to be in his mid-70s with silver hair cropped short and wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a nose that had been broken at least once. His hands, though marked with age spots, moved with precision of decades of practice. "There we go." He straightened, removing the loop and blinking as his eyes adjusted. "What can I help you folks with today?" His gaze traveled from Megan to Lily, then stopped, a flicker of recognition crossing his weathered features. "Well now, you must be Megan." Megan stiffened. "How do you know my name?" The man, Ernest, she presumed, smiled gently. "You look just like your mother. Sarah's girl, aren't you?" "You have her eyes." The confirmation that Sarah was indeed her mother, spoken so casually by this stranger, sent a wave of emotion through Megan that was almost physical in its intensity. "Yes," she managed, voice barely above a whisper. "At least I think so. I just found out yesterday. I was told to find Ernest at the clock shop." Ernest nodded solemnly. Been wondering when this day would come. He glanced at Lily, who was gazing in fascination at a cuckoo clock shaped like a forest cottage. "Perhaps we should talk privately. Martha," he called toward a back room, "could you come watch the shop for a bit and maybe show this young lady how the musical clocks work?" A woman about Ernest's age emerged, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Of course, dear." She smiled warmly at Lily. "Would you like to see the clock that plays a different tune for each hour? It's about to strike 11. With Lily happily occupied, Ernest led Megan to a small office behind the repair area. He closed the door and gestured to a chair. "I expect you have questions." "About 1,000,000, Megan replied, sitting down. "Starting with, who exactly are you and how do you know my mother?" "Ernest Morgan. I was a friend of your father's, Brian Stewart." He settled into a worn leather chair behind a desk cluttered with clock parts and ledgers. "And I wasn't just a clockmaker back then. I was also a former military police officer who helped run a sort of underground network. We assisted people who needed to disappear for their own safety." Megan leaned forward. "And my mother needed to disappear." Ernest nodded gravely. Sarah was in danger, though she didn't realize how much until Brian showed her the evidence he'd gathered. The Pierce family had been systematically forcing ranchers and farmers out of their land for decades. When they discovered Brian was collecting proof of their methods, they made it clear that both he and Sarah and you, once you were born, would suffer consequences if he didn't stop. The letters mentioned financial pressures, but what exactly were they doing? Various tactics. They'd sabotage equipment, contaminate water sources, bribe bank officials to call in loans, suddenly spread rumors that damaged reputations. Anything to create desperate situations that forced families to sell at rock-bottom prices. Ernest's expression hardened at the memories. And they were particularly interested in the Collins and Stewart properties because geological surveys had indicated valuable mineral deposits beneath both ranches. But why didn't Brian go to the authorities? Ernest gave her a look that suggested such naivety was expected but misplaced. The Pierce family owned half the county officials by that point. Harold Pierce's brother-in-law was the county judge. His cousin ran the largest bank in 3 counties. Going to the authorities would have been useless at best, dangerous at worst. "So what happened?" The letter stopped with Brian saying he had to leave to protect us. Ernest sighed heavily. Brian had compiled enough evidence to take to federal authorities, bypassing local officials entirely. He was on his way to Denver to meet with an FBI agent when his car went off the mountain road. Brake lines cut. Classic method, nearly impossible to prove as sabotage rather than mechanical failure. Megan felt a chill despite the office's warmth. "They killed him. We could never prove it, but those of us who knew what he was working on had no doubts." Ernest paused, gaze distant with remembrance. After Brian's death, Sarah was distraught. She knew they'd come for her next, maybe try to take you as leverage. That's when I helped her connect with the network. We arranged for her cousin Evelyn to take you the safest option since you'd be with family, but without obvious connection to Sarah that might put you in danger. And my mother, where did she go? Megan's voice cracked slightly on the word mother, still strange to apply to someone other than Evelyn. At first a safe house near Neyland, Colorado. Later she moved around as needed. She became Sarah Anderson, took my last name, though we weren't related, and eventually settled in a small town in northern Montana. Got her law degree specialized in environmental law. Ironic considering the Pierce's interest in your family's land was primarily for resource exploitation. Megan's mind whirled with these revelations. Her mother was alive. Not only alive, but apparently a successful attorney. Why didn't she ever contact me? Once I was an adult, surely it would have been safe. Ernest's expression softened. She watched over you from a distance. Had friends of the network check in periodically, send photographs, updates on your life. She knew when you graduated college, got married, had Lily. He paused. Sarah wanted to reach out many times, but the threat never fully disappeared. Harold Pierce's son Alexander took over the family business, continued their land acquisition practices, though with more sophisticated methods. And he held a particular grudge against the Collins and Stewart families, blamed them for his father's heart attack after the federal investigation began. Federal investigation, but you said Brian died before he could take his evidence to the FBI. He did, but he'd made copies, left them with trusted friends. After his death, several of us came forward with what we knew. It wasn't enough for criminal charges. The Pierces had covered their tracks too well, but it triggered investigations into their business practices that cost them millions in legal fees and delayed permits. Megan processed everything Ernest was telling her. So she's still afraid after all these years, was, Ernest corrected, until about 6 months ago. What happened 6 months ago? Harold Pierce died. And a few weeks after that, someone from the network spotted Alexander Pierce meeting with known associates at a restaurant in Denver. They were discussing plans for a major lithium mining operation. Apparently there's a significant deposit under what used to be Collins and Stewart land. Your land now. Megan recalled the nocturnal visitor to the barn. Someone was in our barn last night. Ernest didn't look surprised. The network has been monitoring Pierce's activities. When your property purchase went through county records, there was increased activity among his associates. We believe he's looking for the original evidence his father worked so hard to suppress, documentation of their illegal business practices, plus the original geological surveys that Brian had obtained. Why would that matter now after so many years? Statute of limitations has expired on most of their old tactics, true, but the surveys, those could be very valuable. They'd show that the Pierces knew about the mineral deposits when they pressured families to sell, which could potentially open them to fraud charges. More importantly, the original property agreements with the Collins family had a clause that Sarah's father insisted on. If valuable minerals were discovered, within 50 years the family had the right to repurchase the land at the original sale price, plus standard interest. Megan's pulse quickened. So if those surveys proved they knew about the lithium when they bought the land, the entire deal could be invalidated. Ernest nodded, which, given current lithium prices and the size of the deposit they believe is there, could represent billions in lost profits for Pierce Development Group, the current iteration of Mountain West Holdings. No wonder someone was searching the barn. Megan thought of the safety deposit box key they'd found. Brian left evidence in a bank in Denver. He did, and Sarah's been waiting for the right moment to use it. Where is she now? Can I meet her? The question tumbled out before Megan could temper eagerness with caution. Ernest's weathered face creased in a smile. She's been waiting for you to ask. In fact, she's here in Pine Ridge. Here now. Megan half rose from her chair, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety coursing through her. At our house just outside town. She arrived yesterday after I called to tell her you'd bought the old Collins place. Perfect timing, really. With Harold Pierce gone and Alexander making his move toward the mining operation, the moment Sarah's been waiting for has finally arrived. He stood. I can take you to her after lunch if you'd like. Megan sank back into her chair, suddenly overwhelmed. After 40 years, she was about to meet her birth mother, a woman who had given her up not from lack of love, but to protect her. A woman who had watched from a distance, missing all the milestones of Megan's life, to keep her safe from a danger Megan never knew existed. And Evelyn, the woman Megan had known as her mother, had carried this secret to her grave, raising her cousin's daughter as her own, never betraying Sarah's confidence, even as Alzheimer's eroded her memories and inhibitions. In her final confused months, truth had emerged in fragments that Megan dismissed as delusions. "I'd like that very much," Megan finally said, voice steadier than she felt. "But first, there's something else I need to know. The man in our barn last night, could he be dangerous? I have Lily to think about." Ernest's expression grew serious. "Alexander Pierce isn't his father. He's more calculating, less prone to violence. But he's also more desperate. The lithium deposit represents his company's future, and he's invested millions in preparation for mining rights he assumed would be easily obtained once he located the remaining Colin Stewart parcels." "That doesn't answer my question." "No, it doesn't," Ernest sighed. "The truth is I don't know. I don't think he'd hurt a child, but I wouldn't put it past him to use intimidation tactics to pressure you into selling. It might be wise to stay in town tonight. Give us time to arrange better security for your property." Megan thought about the barn, the house, the secrets still potentially hidden there. "I'm not leaving our home. If Pierce wants to intimidate me, he'll find I'm not easily scared off." The conviction in her voice surprised her. It had been a long time since she'd felt so certain of anything. "But I would appreciate any security help your network can provide." Ernest nodded approvingly. "You sound just like Sarah. She'll be pleased to hear it." As they returned to the front of the shop, Megan found Lily enthralled by Martha's demonstration of a complex astronomical clock, showing phases of the moon and planetary positions in addition to time. "Mom, this clock knows when it's going to be full moon. Can we get one, please?" Lily bounced with excitement earlier, wariness completely forgotten. "We'll see, sweetie. Maybe for Christmas." Megan smiled at Martha. "Thank you for keeping her entertained." "My pleasure entirely. Such a bright young lady." Martha's gaze moved between Lily and Megan, expression softening. "She has Sarah's curiosity." So Martha was part of this too, part of the network that had protected Sarah, and by extension, Megan herself. How many people in this small town knew more about Megan's origins than she did? "We've been invited to lunch," Megan told Lily. "Would you like to meet some new friends?" "Will they have ice cream?" Lily's priorities remained charmingly consistent. Ernest chuckled. "I believe we can arrange that." As they prepared to leave the clock shop, the bell above the door chimed, announcing a new customer. Ernest tensed slightly, then relaxed as an elderly man with a walking cane entered. "Morning, Joseph," Ernest called. "Just closing up for lunch. Can it wait till after?" Joseph, a lean man with a farmer's weathered complexion, glanced curiously at Megan and Lily before nodding. "No rush, Ernest. Just bringing Marjorie's anniversary clock in for its annual service." His gaze lingered on Megan. "Forgive me, miss, but you look mighty familiar. You related to folks around here?" Before Megan could answer, Ernest stepped in smoothly. "Joseph, this is Megan Reynolds and her daughter Lily. They just bought the old Collins place out on County Road 7. Recognition dawned in Joseph's eyes. "Collins Place, well, now that's something. Haven't heard it called that in decades." He extended a gnarled hand to Megan. "Joseph Bennett. I worked that land with Richard Collins back in the day before the troubles came. You're Sarah's girl, aren't you?" Got her eyes, sure enough. Megan shook his hand, startled at being so easily identified. "Yes, apparently I am. Though I only learned that yesterday." Joseph nodded sagely. "Figured as much. Evelyn did right by you from what I hear. Good woman, your aunt." "She was," Megan agreed, still adjusting to thinking of Evelyn as aunt rather than mother. "Did you know my father too, Brian Stewart?" A shadow crossed Joseph's weathered face. "Fine man. Didn't deserve what happened to him. None of them did." He glanced at Ernest. "You telling her about the Pierces?" "Started to. There's a lot to cover." Ernest's tone suggested the conversation should move elsewhere. Joseph took the hint. "Well, I won't keep you from your lunch." "But Miss She..." He turned back to Megan, expression grave. "Watch yourself out at that place. Alexander Pierce has been asking questions all over town since your purchase went through. Mighty interested in that barn of yours." "So I've gathered," Megan replied earlier, unease returning. "Someone was in it last night." Joseph's bushy eyebrows rose. "Bold move even for a Pierce. You be careful. That family plays the long game, and they don't like losing." With a nod to Ernest and gentle smile for Lily, He departed, the bell tinkling in his wake. Outside, bright Wyoming sunshine seemed at odds with the shadowy conspiracies Megan had been hearing about. Pine Ridge's main street bustled with modest activity of a small town at midday, people entering the diner, a mail truck parked at the post office, teenagers lounging on a bench outside the general store. How many of these ordinary-seeming townsfolk knew about Sarah Collins and Brian Stewart? How many were part of Ernest's network? And how many might be aligned with Pierce's interests? As if sensing her thoughts, Ernest spoke quietly as they walked toward his truck. Not everyone in town knows Sarah's story. Those who do fall into two camps, people who help protect her and people who believe the lies Pierce's father spread after she disappeared. What lies? Yes. That she'd had a breakdown after Brian's death, that she'd been institutionalized. Later rumors circulated that she died in a facility somewhere in Colorado. Ernest's expression hardened. Harold Pierce even produced a fake death certificate for Sarah Collins in 2019, probably hoping to put to rest any lingering questions about her whereabouts or claims to the land. A fake death certificate, isn't that illegal? Highly. But when you own half the county officials and have millions to spend on problems, certain illegalities become merely expensive inconveniences. They reached a blue pickup truck parked in front of the hardware store. "We'll take my truck to the house. It's just outside town, about 10 minutes. As they drove through Pine Ridge and into the surrounding countryside, Megan watched the landscape roll past, trying to imagine her mother growing up here, falling in love with Brian Stewart, facing the devastating choice to give up her daughter for safety's sake. What kind of strength had that required? What kind of pain had Sarah lived with all these years? Ernest's house turned out to be a modest, ranch-style home, set back from the road with well-tended garden and a workshop behind it that presumably housed his clock-making equipment when he wasn't at the shop in town. Martha had apparently called ahead because as they pulled into the driveway, the front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch, slender, with silver-streaked dark hair cut in a stylish bob, wearing jeans and a blue blouse. She stood very still, one hand gripping the porch railing, as if for support. Even at this distance, even after 40 years, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes that had looked out from those yellowed photographs now watched Megan's approach with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Sarah Collins had come home. Megan stepped out of the truck, legs unsteady, heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Lily scrambled out after her, oblivious to the emotional magnitude of the moment, already distracted by a tabby cat sunning itself on the garden wall. "Is that her mom?" Lily stage whispered, following Megan's gaze to the woman on the porch. "She looks like you, only older." "Yes, sweetie, that's—" Megan hesitated, suddenly uncertain what to call this stranger who was her mother. "That's Sarah." As if hearing her name had broken some spell, Sarah descended the porch steps, moving toward them with careful deliberation of someone who's afraid that any sudden movement might shatter a dream. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes, Megan's eyes, taking in every detail of her daughter's face. "Megan," she said softly, voice steady despite the emotion clearly visible on her face. "You're even more beautiful than your pictures." And suddenly, despite all the questions still unanswered, despite the danger that might still exist, despite 40 years of separation, Megan knew exactly what to do. She closed the distance between them and embraced her mother for the first time in her adult life. "I found you," she whispered against Sarah's hair. "Just like you knew I would." For a long moment, time seemed suspended in the Montana sunlight as Megan and Sarah held each other. The embrace contained 40 years of absence, countless missed milestones, and the tentative hope of recovery. They stood together until a small hand tugged at Megan's sleeve. "Mom, is she crying?" Lily's whisper broke the spell, her voice tinged with concern. Megan stepped back, noticing the shimmer of tears in Sarah's eyes that mirrored her own. Introductions followed, awkward, emotional, insufficient for the magnitude of the moment, but Lily's natural curiosity quickly bridged the gap that decades had created. "Are you my grandma?" Like Grandma Evelyn was, Lily's directness brought a fresh wave of emotion to Sarah's face. Sarah knelt to Lily's level, her movements careful, as though approaching a wild creature she didn't want to startle. "Yes, in a way, I'm your mother's birth mother, which makes me your biological grandmother." "What does biological mean?" Lily tested the unfamiliar word. "It means connected by blood, by the same family tree." Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her face, erasing years of worry. And you, Lily Reynolds, have your grandfather's curious mind and your mother's artistic spirit. Martha emerged from the house announcing lunch was ready, a merciful interruption that gave everyone a chance to compose themselves. The meal homemade chicken salad sandwiches, fresh fruit, and cookies, still warm from the oven, provided a comfortable framework for the initial awkwardness of strangers who were also family. For Lily's benefit, conversation remained light. Ernest shared stories about the most unusual clocks he'd repaired, while Martha described the local wildlife that frequented their bird feeders. Sarah spoke little, her eyes frequently returning to Megan's face, as though memorizing features she'd only seen in photographs for decades. After lunch, Martha offered to show Lily the workshop behind the house, where Ernest restored antique clock mechanisms. I have a music box collection you might enjoy. Some are over 100 years old. With Lily happily occupied, the adults gathered in Ernest and Martha's sun-dappled living room, the mood shifting to something more urgent. Ernest poured coffee while Sarah retrieved a leather portfolio from a nearby desk. I've been preparing for this day for a very long time. Sarah placed the portfolio on the coffee table between them. When Ernest called to say you'd purchased the Collins property, I knew it was finally time. Megan's fingers trembled slightly as she accepted the portfolio. Inside lay dozens of photographs, baby pictures, school portraits, candids of her at various ages, snapshots from her college graduation, her wedding day, even recent images of her with Lily at a Chicago park. An entire life documented from afar. How Megan's voice caught on the single word, the enormity of this surveillance, both touching and unsettling. The network. Sarah's eyes held a mixture of longing and apology. Friends in Chicago, people who understood what was at stake. I never came myself too risky, but they sent me updates, photographs. I've watched you grow up from a distance. The revelation that strangers had been monitoring her life for decades should have felt invasive, but instead Megan found herself oddly comforted. She hadn't been abandoned. She'd been protected through separation, loved through distance. Ernest cleared his throat. We should discuss the Pierce situation. Now that you're here, they'll be watching more closely. Joseph was right. Alexander has been asking questions all over town since your property purchase went through. Sarah's expression hardened, the gentle mother vanishing behind the determined look of someone who'd spent decades preparing for a confrontation. Ernest filled me in about the barn break-in. It confirms what we suspected. Alexander is searching for the original geological surveys and property agreements. I still don't understand why these documents matter after so many years. Megan set the portfolio aside, trying to focus on the present danger, rather than the emotional whirlwind of reconnection. Because of the mineral rights clause, Sarah extracted a folded document from her pocket. My father was nobody's fool. He'd heard rumors about the Pierce's business practices even back then. When they pressured him to sell during my scandal with Brian, he insisted on a protective clause. She smoothed the document on the table, a copy of the original property sale agreement between Richard Collins and Mountain West Holdings, dated September 1985. Sarah's finger traced a paragraph near the bottom of the page. The Collins family retains right of first refusal for any mineral extraction permits and right to repurchase the property at original sale price plus standard interest if economically viable mineral deposits are discovered within 50 years of this agreement. And there's lithium under my property. Megan completed the thought. Valuable lithium that the Pierces knew about when they forced your father to sell. Exactly, Sarah nodded. Based on current market values, we're talking about billions in potential mining revenue, and the 50-year window doesn't close until 2035. Ernest leaned forward. The Pierces have spent decades burying this history, destroying evidence of their knowledge of the deposits and spreading the story that Sarah had a mental breakdown after Brian's death. They even produced a fake death certificate for her a few years ago, probably hoping to eliminate any potential claimants to the mineral rights. A chill ran through Megan as the implications became clear. So when I purchased the property, suddenly there was a Collins descendant back on the land, potentially with access to evidence that could validate the mineral rights claim. More than potentially, Sarah replied, her voice steady. Brian left proof in that Denver safety deposit box. Did you find the key? Yes, in a tin box buried in the barn, Megan confirmed, along with letters between you and Brian. But why would he hide evidence in the barn rather than take it directly to authorities? A shadow passed over Sarah's face. He was planning to. The night before he was going to Denver with the evidence, he came to see me. He was worried something might happen, so he made copies. One set he took with him, another he hid in the barn, and a third he left with his trusted friend, a lawyer in Denver named Frank Carter. Ernest nodded. Frank was part of the network. After Brian's accident, Frank tried to use the evidence to bring charges against the Pierces, but without Brian's testimony, it wasn't enough for criminal prosecution. The investigation stalled, though it did cost the Pierces millions in legal delays and PR damage control. What happened to Frank? Megan asked, already suspecting the answer. A heart attack in 1990, Sarah replied, her tone making it clear she believed it was no coincidence. The Pierces have always played the long game. They're patient, methodical, and utterly ruthless when their interests are threatened. The gravity of the situation settled over Megan. This wasn't just about discovering her true parentage anymore. She'd unwittingly stepped into a decades-long conflict with a powerful family willing to eliminate obstacles to their financial interests. What do they want with me? Megan's thoughts turned to Lily, her protective instincts flaring. I'm just a single mom trying to start over. I don't have any claim to mineral rights. I didn't even know about any of this until yesterday. Sarah and Ernest exchanged glances before Sarah replied. First, they want to make sure you don't have any evidence that could validate the mineral rights clause. But more importantly, they want the land, your land. Alexander Pierce has already secured mining permits for the surrounding parcels. Your 40 acres sits right in the middle of what geological surveys indicate is the richest part of the lithium deposit. How do you know so much about their plans? Megan asked, suspicious of this perfect intelligence. Sarah's lips curved in a thin smile. I told you I became an environmental attorney. What I didn't mention is that my specialty is fighting corporate exploitation of rural communities, particularly mining operations. I've been tracking Pierce Development Group for decades, gathering evidence, building a case. When Harold Pierce died 6 months ago, Alexander accelerated plans for the lithium operation. He's already invested millions in preliminary infrastructure and equipment. So what do we do now? Megan glanced toward the workshop where Lily was visible through the window laughing as Martha demonstrated something with a clock mechanism. How do I keep my daughter safe? We go to Denver, Sarah replied without hesitation. Tomorrow, we need what's in that safety deposit box. With those documents and what I've gathered over the years, we'll have enough to challenge Alexander's permits and possibly bring fraud charges. The mineral rights clause is still legally binding, but we need proof the Pierces knew about the lithium when they originally acquired the land. The decisiveness in Sarah's voice awakened something in Megan, a strength she hadn't accessed in years, certainly not during her difficult divorce or subsequent layoff. Perhaps it was genetics asserting themselves, the Collins determination flowing through her veins. I'm not running away. Megan's tone matched her mother's in resolve. This is my home now, mine and Lily's. We've already lost too much. I won't let them drive us away. For the first time since their reunion, Sarah's composure cracked, pride and worry warring in her expression. You truly are your father's daughter. He said those exact words the night before he died. Ernest cleared his throat. Nobody's suggesting you abandon your home, Megan, but we need to be strategic. The Pierces aren't just wealthy businessmen. They're predators who've spent generations perfecting their methods. They use legal pressure, financial manipulation, and when necessary, more direct means of persuasion. They killed my father, Megan stated flatly, and they would have killed you too if they had found you. Sarah nodded grimly. They still would if they thought it would secure their interests. That's why we need to move quickly. Once we have the evidence from Denver, we go public all at once, too broadly for them to contain. Local news, state officials, federal mining regulators, environmental groups. We create too many fronts for them to fight simultaneously. But first we need to secure your property, Ernest added. I've called in some help, trusted people from the network who'll keep an eye on things while we're gone. Megan tensed at the thought of strangers watching her home, then reminded herself that these people had been protecting her mother for decades. What about Lily? I don't want her involved in this. Martha can stay with her here, Sarah suggested. It would be safer than bringing her to Denver, and certainly safer than leaving her at the farm with Pierce's people watching. The idea of separation from her daughter even briefly triggered every maternal alarm in Megan's system. I don't know. She barely knows you all, no offense intended, and after everything that's happened lately, she's been anxious about changes. Martha appeared in the doorway as if summoned by the discussion. Lily's asking about ice cream. I told her we could walk to the shop on Main Street if that's all right with you. Megan hesitated, maternal caution warring with the need to continue their planning session. That would be fine, thank you. After Martha and Lily departed for their ice cream expedition, Sarah leaned forward. I understand your concerns about leaving Lily, but consider this: the sooner we secure the evidence, the sooner this threat ends. One day apart now could prevent weeks or months of looking over your shoulder. The logic was sound, but Megan's heart resisted. I'll think about it. First, I want to know more about this network of yours. How many people are involved? How have you kept it secret all these years? Ernest smiled slightly. It started small, just a few of us who couldn't stomach the Pierce's methods. Military veterans mostly who'd seen enough injustice overseas and weren't willing to tolerate it in our hometown. Over the years, it expanded, became more organized. Now we have members in several states, people who help those who need to disappear for their safety. Like a private witness protection program, Megan observed. Something like that, Sarah agreed. Only for people the system can't or won't protect: women fleeing abusive partners with political connections, whistleblowers threatened by powerful corporations, families targeted by organized crime, people for whom official channels have failed. The magnitude of this revelation settled over Megan. This wasn't just about her mother or the Collins property she'd stumbled into, something far larger, a shadow network operating outside official channels to provide protection where the law fell short. How did you fund something like this? Megan asked, professional curiosity from her marketing days emerging. This kind of operation must require significant resources. A hint of amusement flickered across Sarah's face. You're thinking like a businesswoman. Good. That perspective will be valuable. She paused, considering her words carefully. The network is largely self-funding through a foundation that appears to support rural community development and environmental protection. Both legitimate causes we actually advance, but with additional resources allocated to our protection work. And significant anonymous donations from beneficiaries who've established successful new lives, Ernest added. People don't forget when you save them from powerful enemies. They tend to be generous once they're safe. Megan processed this information, her mind working through implications. So when you said you've been waiting for the right moment to confront the Pierces, you weren't just speaking metaphorically. You've been preparing for this for decades, gathering resources, building a network. Justice is patient. Sarah's voice carried the weight of 40 years' determination. And so am I. The conversation paused as Ernest's phone chimed with a message. He checked it, his expression shifting to concern. Joseph just texted. Someone matching Alexander Pierce's description was asking about you at Mabel's Diner. Mentioned he was interested in buying your property, wanted to know if anyone had contact information. Megan felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. He moves fast. He's been waiting for this opportunity for years, Sarah replied, and he's just as motivated to prevent us from accessing that safety deposit box as we are to open it. The sound of the front door opening announced Martha and Lily's return, the child's animated chatter about triple scoop ice cream filling the suddenly tense atmosphere. Megan forced a smile, watching her daughter's chocolate-smeared face with a fierce protectiveness that clarified her decision. I'll go to Denver, Megan announced once Lily had been settled in another room with a book. But I want to check on the house first. There might be other evidence hidden there that we haven't found yet. Sarah nodded approvingly. We should go this evening after dark. Less chance of being observed. I'll make arrangements for security. Ernest moved toward his office. Joseph and his sons will keep watch tonight, and I have other network members who can relieve them tomorrow. The remaining afternoon passed in careful preparation. Sarah briefed Megan on everything she gathered about Alexander Pierce, his business methods, known associates, political connections. Martha quietly packed overnight bags for their Denver trip, while Ernest coordinated with various network members via encrypted messaging apps. Megan spent time with Lily, trying to gauge how her daughter would react to a brief separation. To her surprise, Lily seemed enchanted by Martha, particularly after the older woman showed her how to make a simple clockwork toy from spare parts in Ernest's workshop. Can I stay with Miss Martha tomorrow if you need to go somewhere, Mom? Lily asked during dinner unprompted. She said she'd teach me how to make a music box that plays my favorite song. The innocent question humming just as Megan had been working up the courage to broach the subject felt like a sign. Would you be okay with that? I might need to take care of some grown-up business with Sarah. Sure, Lily shrugged with the easy adaptability of childhood. Miss Martha said I could help feed the chickens in the morning and collect eggs. I've never collected eggs before. Relief washed over Megan, though it was quickly tempered by a new concern. Was Lily becoming too comfortable with these strangers too quickly? Then again, children often sensed genuineness in adults that even the most sophisticated pretenses couldn't fake. If Lily trusted Martha and Ernest, perhaps Megan should trust her daughter's instincts. As twilight deepened into dusk, Megan, Sarah, and Ernest prepared for their reconnaissance mission to the Collins farm. They would take separate vehicles. Ernest first to ensure the property was clear of unwanted visitors, followed by Megan and Sarah 15 minutes later. Megan knelt before Lily, who was already in pajamas, and settled on Martha's comfortable guest bed with a stack of books. I'll be back in a couple of hours, sweetie. Miss Martha will be right downstairs if you need anything. Are you going to find more treasure in our barn? Lily asked, eyes bright with adventure rather than anxiety. Maybe. Megan smiled, relieved at her daughter's calm acceptance. I just need to check on Scout and make sure everything's okay at the house. Bring Scout here, he can sleep in my room. Lily suggested, the idea clearly appealing to her. We'll see, Megan kissed her forehead. Be good for Miss Martha. The drive back to the Collins farm followed winding country roads, now silver in the moonlight. Sarah sat beside Megan in the passenger seat, her profile sharp against the night landscape, hands folded tightly in her lap, the only sign of her tension. Tell me about him. Megan broke the silence as they turned onto the county highway. My father. The letters show what he felt for you, but I want to know what kind of man he was. Sarah's posture softened slightly, the memory bringing both pain and comfort. Brian was extraordinary in ordinary ways. Not flashy or dramatic, but solid, a man who saw injustice and couldn't look away, who believed problems were meant to be solved rather than accepted. She paused, gathering memories. He loved the land, understood it in a way most people never do. Could predict weather changes from how the cattle behaved or how the wind smelled. His family had been ranchers for generations, but he was also forward-thinking, studied agricultural science, wanted to implement sustainable practices before that was common. How did you meet? Megan asked, hungry for details of the history that had created her. Community college library. I was studying for a business exam. He was researching irrigation systems. A smile touched Sarah's lips. He asked to borrow my calculator and returned it with a note thanking me and asking if I'd like to get coffee. His handwriting was terrible, all capital letters like architectural drafting, but the sentiment was sweet. But he was married, Megan observed, not judgmentally but seeking understanding. Sarah's expression dimmed. Not when we met. His marriage to Rebecca came later, a business arrangement between families. The Stewarts were land-rich but cash-poor after a difficult decade. The Flemings had money but wanted the social standing of connecting to an established ranching family. She sighed the sound, carrying decades of regret. We'd been together almost 2 years when the families orchestrated the marriage. Brian tried to refuse, but his father's health was failing, and the ranch was deeply in debt. The Fleming money was the only thing that could save his family legacy. So you ended things. Megan navigated a sharp curve in the road, the headlights briefly illuminating a grazing deer that bounded away. We tried, Sarah admitted. For almost a year, we managed to stay apart. I dated other people. He tried to make his marriage work, but then we ran into each other at the county agricultural fair and she trailed off, the conclusion obvious. And 9 months later, I was born. Megan completed the thought. 8.5, actually. You were impatient even then. The gentle teasing bridged years of separation, creating a moment of ordinary mother-daughter banter that felt both strange and profoundly right. They fell silent as Megan turned onto the gravel driveway leading to the Collins farm. Ernest's truck was already parked behind the house, mostly hidden from the road. He emerged from the shadows as they approached, his expression tense. Coast is clear for now, but there are fresh tire tracks down by the south fence line. Someone's been here today. He gestured for them to follow him into the house rather than the barn. Let's check inside first, make sure nothing's been disturbed. Scout greeted them with enthusiastic barking, clearly relieved to see Megan after being alone for several hours. She knelt to reassure him while Sarah stood in the center of the kitchen, her eyes taking in every detail of the home that had once belonged to her family. "It's smaller than I remember," Sarah murmured, trailing fingers along the edge of the kitchen table. "The layout's the same, but the details are different. Dad's gun cabinet used to stand there." She pointed to an empty corner, now occupied by a bookshelf. "We should check the attic," Megan suggested, recalling where she'd hidden the boxes from the barn. "I put everything we found up there behind Lily's reading nook." The three moved through the house methodically, looking for signs of intrusion. Nothing seemed obviously disturbed, though Scout's behavior, sniffing intently at certain doorways and windows, suggested someone might have attempted entry without success. In the attic, Megan's heart sank as she discovered the hiding place emptied, the wooden box and tin container, both gone along with all their contents. "They found them," she whispered. "Everything we discovered is gone." Sarah's jaw tightened, but surprisingly, she didn't seem devastated by the news. "Expected, unfortunately, but it changes nothing. The most important evidence is still in Denver." "But the letters," Megan began. "Are copies," Sarah finished. Brian was methodical about documentation. "Everything important exists in multiple locations." Ernest, who had been examining the window, called them over. "Look at this." He pointed to barely perceptible scratches on the lock. "Professional work." They came prepared. "How did they get past Scout?" Megan wondered, rubbing the dog's ears absently. "Probably used something to distract him," Ernest suggested. "Food laced with mild sedative or an electronic device that emits high-frequency sound to drive him to another part of the property temporarily." The violation of her home, this place that was supposed to represent a fresh start, ignited a slow-burning anger in Megan. "Let's check the barn. Maybe they didn't find everything." Outside, the night had deepened, a three-quarter moon casting silver light across the property. They moved quietly toward the barn, Scout leading the way, his posture alert but not alarmed. Ernest produced a small but powerful flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as they entered the cavernous space. Evidence of thorough searching was immediately apparent. Floorboards pried up throughout the structure, the dirt floor disturbed in multiple locations, even sections of wall where boards had been removed to check for hidden spaces. "Comprehensive," Ernest observed grimly. They knew exactly what they were looking for and had time to be thorough. Sarah moved to the area where the feed trough had concealed the buried tin box, kneeling to examine the disturbed earth. "They found both hiding spots, but I wonder if they found the third." Megan turned sharply. "There's another one." "Brian wouldn't have limited himself to just two locations," Sarah replied, moving toward the back of the barn where a massive center beam supported the structure. "He believed in redundancy." She ran her hands along the aged wood fingers, searching for something specific. Halfway up the beam, she paused, a slight smile touching her lips. "Still here," she murmured, pressing against what appeared to be a knot in the wood. To Megan's astonishment, a small section of the beam pivoted outward, revealing a narrow cavity carved into the massive timber. From this hiding place, Sarah extracted a small oilskin packet, its surface dusty but intact. "What is it?" Megan moved closer, heart racing with renewed hope. "Insurance." Sarah unwrapped the oilskin, revealing a folded document and a small key different from the one they'd found earlier. "This is the original mineral rights agreement between the Collins and Stewart families, predating the sale to Mountain West Holdings. And this," she held up the key, "is for a different safety deposit box. One the Pierces don't know about." Ernest let out a low whistle of appreciation. "Brian thought of everything." "Not everything." Sarah's expression darkened momentarily. "Or he'd still be alive. But he came close." She carefully rewrapped the document and key, tucking them securely into an inner pocket of her jacket. "We should go. We've lingered too long already." As they turned to leave, Scout's posture changed suddenly, ears forward, body rigid, a low growl building in his chest. Seconds later, the distant sound of vehicle engines broke the night stillness. "Company," Ernest muttered, extinguishing his flashlight. "Out the back now." They slipped through the rear barn door just as headlights swept across the main entrance, illuminating dust motes and brilliant streams. From the safety of shadows behind the structure, they watched two SUVs pull up to the barn, their high-end styling distinctly out of place in the rural setting. Four men emerged from the vehicles, led by a tall figure whose confident stride suggested authority. Even in the dim moonlight, his expensive suit and perfectly styled hair marked him as different from his companions. Alexander Pierce, Sarah breathed, her voice barely audible. I'd recognize that arrogant walk anywhere. Megan studied the man who had apparently orchestrated her father's death, driven her mother into hiding, and now threatened her own fresh start. He appeared to be in his 50s, fit and commanding, directing his companions with minimal gestures as they entered the barn. We need to go, Ernest whispered. If they find us here. The unfinished sentence hung in the air, its implications clear. They retreated silently toward the shadows behind the house where their vehicles waited, Gout padding noiselessly beside them, apparently understanding the need for stealth. As they reached Megan's car, Sarah paused, her expression torn between caution and determination. I could confront him now, end this tonight. And accomplish what? Ernest countered, his voice low but urgent. He has armed men with him, and we're unprepared. This isn't the moment, Sarah. For a second, Megan thought her mother might ignore the warning. 4 decades of hiding, of watching from a distance while others lived the life she should have had, the temptation to confront her enemy directly must be overwhelming. But then Sarah's shoulders relaxed fractionally, reason overcoming emotion. You're right, Denver first, evidence secure. Then we fight. They separated to their respective vehicles, planning to reconvene at Ernest's house. As Megan started her car, she caught sight of movement near the barn entrance. Alexander Pierce standing in the moonlight, head tilted, as though listening to the sound of their engines. For a brief, chilling moment, she felt certain he was looking directly at her, despite the distance and darkness separating them. Then the moment passed and they were driving away, leaving the Collins farm and its uninvited visitors behind. Back at Ernest's house, they found Martha waiting anxiously in the kitchen, relief washing over her face as they entered. Thank goodness! Joseph called, said he drove by and saw vehicles he didn't recognize at the farm. I was getting worried. Pierce and his men, Ernest confirmed, pouring coffee for everyone. They were searching the barn, probably hoping to find what we just recovered. But why now? Martha asked, keeping her voice low to avoid waking Lily upstairs. After all these years, why is he suddenly moving so aggressively? The lithium, Sarah replied, spreading the mineral rights agreement on the kitchen table. Global demand has skyrocketed with the shift to electric vehicles and renewable energy storage. What was a valuable deposit 20 years ago is now worth billions. Add to that Harold's death, removing his cautious restraint and Alexander's ambition to expand the family empire. Perfect storm, Megan finished the thought. And my purchase of the property forced his hand. He had to act before we discovered what we were sitting on. Too late, Sarah allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction, tapping the document. This agreement predates the sale to Mountain West Holdings. It establishes a joint mineral rights compact between the Collins and Stewart families that was never legally dissolved despite the subsequent land sales. With this and what's in the Denver safety deposit box, we can challenge not just the specific mining permits for your 40 acres, but potentially all of Pierce Development Group's operations on former Collins Stewart land. Which would cost them, Ernest prompted. Conservatively, several billion in future revenue, Sarah replied, plus potential fraud charges if we can prove they knew about the deposits when they forced the original sales. The magnitude of what they were up against settled over Megan, not just a wealthy businessman trying to acquire her property, but a powerful family protecting a multi-billion-dollar interest built on decades of deception and intimidation. What happens now? Megan asked, suddenly exhausted by the day's emotional and physical demands. We leave for Denver at first light. Sarah's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. The sooner we secure what's in that safety deposit box, the better. Ernest nodded agreement. I've arranged for Joseph and 2 other network members to watch your property in shifts. Martha will stay here with Lily. I'll drive you both to Denver safer if we're together. The plan made sense, but Megan found herself struggling with the rapid acceleration of events. 48 hours ago, she had been a single mother starting over in a new home. Now she was enmeshed in a decades-old conspiracy, reunited with a mother she never knew existed, and facing off against a powerful enemy, willing to use any means necessary to protect his interests. I should check on Lily. Megan rose from the table, needing a moment to process everything. Upstairs, she found her daughter sleeping peacefully. Scout now curled protectively at the foot of the bed. Ernest must have brought him up while they were talking. The domestic scene provided a momentary anchor in the churning sea of revelations and dangers. Megan sat gently on the edge of the bed, brushing a curl from Lily's forehead. In sleep, her daughter's features relaxed into an expression that suddenly startlingly reminded Megan of the photographs she'd seen of Brian Stewart. The genetic connection across generations, visible even in slumber, reinforced the reality of everything she'd discovered. "I'll keep you safe," she whispered to her sleeping child, "whatever it takes." Well, when she returned downstairs, Sarah was alone in the kitchen, Ernest and Martha having retired to make preparations for tomorrow's journey. Mother and daughter regarded each other across the room, decades of separation crystallized in the space between them. "I missed everything." Sarah finally broke the silence, her voice tight with emotion. "Your first steps, first words, first day of school, your graduation, your wedding." She trailed off, composure threatening to crack. "Was she good to you, Evelyn?" "The best," Megan replied honestly. "Patient, supportive, loving. She encouraged my interest in art when David thought it was impractical. Taught me to stand up for myself, to keep going when things got hard." Sarah nodded, blinking rapidly. "She was always the strong one in the family. When we were girls, she protected me from bullies, taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework. When I had to leave you, she was the only person I trusted completely to raise you right." Why didn't she ever tell me the truth? The question had been building in Megan since the first discovery in the barn. Even after I was an adult, even after the Pierces couldn't hurt me anymore, why keep the secret? "Because I asked her to," Sarah admitted. "The agreement was that you would be told when you turned 21, but by then Alexander had taken over the family business and was expanding aggressively into areas where the network operated. We detected surveillance on several of our safe houses. It seemed the threat hadn't diminished with time, but had simply evolved." She sighed, the weight of decades of difficult choices evident in the sound. "Every year we reassess the risk. Every year it seems safer to wait just a little longer. Then Evelyn was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and the decision was taken out of our hands." She tried to tell me at the end. Megan realized, pieces clicking into place. All those stories about the baby in the barn, the girl who ran away, they weren't delusions. They were the truth breaking through as her mind lost its filters. "I visited her once in the care facility," Sarah revealed quietly. "Disguised, of course. She didn't recognize me consciously, but she held my hand and told me not to worry, that you'd turned out just like your mother, stubborn as a mule and twice as smart." I think some part of her knew even then. The revelation of this final connection, her two mothers meeting one last time without her knowledge, brought fresh tears to Megan's eyes. "I wish I'd known. I wish I could have had both of you in my life." "So do I." Sarah reached across the table, taking Megan's hand in a grip that held 40 years of absence. "But we're together now, and we're going to finish what Brian started. The Pierces have taken enough from this family." The determination in her voice stirred something in Megan, a resolute strength she hadn't accessed in years. Tomorrow they would drive to Denver, retrieve the evidence Brian had hidden, and confront the power that had shaped their lives through absence. Tonight, for the first time in 4 decades, mother and daughter shared the same roof, connected by blood, separated history, and united by purpose. In the darkness outside, unknown to them, a black SUV cruised slowly past Ernest's house, its driver noting the vehicles in the driveway before continuing on, apparently unhurried, but watching, always watching. Dawn cast long shadows across Ernest's yard as they loaded the truck. The mood was tense, a conversation limited to essential logistics, departure times, routes, emergency contacts. Megan knelt to hug Lily, inhaling the familiar scent of her daughter's hair, strawberry shampoo mingling with the earthy aroma of a child who had already been helping Martha feed chickens. "I'll be back tomorrow night." Megan pressed her forehead against Lily's. "Be good for Miss Martha, okay?" "I will. She's going to show me how to make a pie with the blackberries we picked today." Lily's excitement about the adventure ahead of her made the separation both easier and harder. "Are you and Grandma Sarah going to find more treasure?" The casual use of Grandma Sarah caught Megan off guard, this instant acceptance of a relationship that had taken Megan herself days to process. Children adapted with a fluidity adults could only envy. "Something like that." Megan managed a smile. "Important papers that will help us keep our new home safe." Scout whined softly from the porch where he'd been instructed to stay. The decision to leave him with Lily had been difficult but necessary. The dog would protect her daughter, and his presence at the bank might attract unwanted attention. Martha emerged from the house carrying a thermos and paper bag. Coffee and muffins for the road. Joseph called. He drove by your place this morning. Pierce and his men left around midnight, but there's a black sedan parked down the road with a clear view of your driveway. Ernest nodded grimly. Surveillance. They're watching to see if we return. Good thing we planned an alternative route back. The first hour of their journey passed in vigilant silence. Ernest drove, eyes constantly checking the rear-view mirror for signs of pursuit. Sarah sat beside him, the oilskin packet containing the mineral rights agreement and safety deposit key clutched in her lap like a talisman. Megan occupied the back seat, thoughts alternating between concern for Lily and processing the whirlwind of revelations about her origins. We're not being followed. Ernest finally broke the silence as they merged onto the interstate toward Denver. At least not obviously. Pierce probably assumes we're still in Pine Ridge. Don't underestimate him. Sarah's voice carried the weight of decades of caution. Alexander is smarter than his father, more patient. Harold would have confronted us directly by now, but Alexander plays chess, not checkers. The miles unspooled beneath them, Wyoming's open plains gradually giving way to Colorado's more dramatic landscape. Mountains rose on the horizon, their peaks still snow-capped, even in summer. Megan found herself studying her mother's profile against this backdrop, noting the similarities in their features that she'd never recognized in a mirror. The slight arch of eyebrows, the way tension gathered at the corner of their mouths. Tell me about your life, Megan ventured, realizing how little she knew about the woman who had given birth to her. After you became Sarah Anderson. What was it like? Sarah continued, gazing out the window, but her expression softened slightly. Lonely at first, terrifying. I spent 6 months at a safe house near Neeland, barely leaving the property. Cried myself to sleep most nights, missing you, missing Brian, mourning the life that had been taken from us. She paused, collecting memories. Eventually I started rebuilding. Worked as a legal secretary while taking night classes. Law school came later, after I'd established my new identity firmly enough to risk the increased visibility. The network helped with documentation, references, the background needed to create a complete life. You never married, Megan asked, wondering if her mother had found some measure of personal happiness during those years of separation. Once, briefly, to another network member, actually a widower, with his own reasons for keeping a low profile. Robert Anderson. Good mankind, but we were more partners than lovers. The marriage provided additional legitimacy to my identity, mutual protection. When he died in 2003, I kept the name. On the revelation that her mother had constructed an entire alternate life marriage, included to maintain her safety, brought home the magnitude of what the Pierce family had stolen from them. Not just years together, but the very possibility of living authentically. Denver's skyline appeared in the distance, glass towers reflecting the morning sun. Ernest navigated through increasing traffic, eventually pulling into a parking garage 3 blocks from First National Bank of Colorado. Better to approach separately, he advised as he cut the engine. I'll go first, check for anything suspicious. Sarah, you follow 5 minutes later. Megan, wait another 5. We'll meet inside the bank. The precaution seemed excessive to Megan until she caught the tightness around her mother's eyes, the way Sarah's hand unconsciously checked the inner pocket where she'd secured the key and document. 40 years of vigilance had taught Sarah never to assume safety. Megan waited her allotted time, watching the minutes tick by on her phone before walking briskly toward the bank. Denver's business district hummed with weekday activity, professionals hurrying between meetings, couriers on bicycles weaving through traffic, food trucks setting up for the lunch rush. Normal life continuing all around her while she moved through a reality that felt increasingly detached from everyday concerns. Inside the bank, cool air conditioning and the hushed atmosphere of wealth enveloped her. Ernest sat in the waiting area pretending to read a financial magazine. Sarah stood at the service counter, speaking with a bank officer. Their careful orchestration of separate arrivals now seemed almost theatrical against the backdrop of banking routine. Sarah beckoned Megan over as the officer, a woman in her 50s, with an impeccable gray suit and carefully neutral expression, led them toward the vault area. Mrs. Anderson has explained that you'll be accessing her safety deposit box today. The officer addressed Megan with professional courtesy. I'll need to see your identification, please. Megan provided her driver's license, anxiety flickering as she realized the discrepancy between her documented identity as Megan Reynolds and their claim that she was Sarah Anderson's daughter. But Sarah had anticipated this challenge. My daughter kept her married name after her divorce, Sarah explained smoothly. Her birth certificate and my identification should be sufficient under your policies for family access. From her handbag, Sarah produced documents that Megan hadn't seen before: a birth certificate identifying Sarah Anderson as the mother of Megan Collins, along with what appeared to be adoption papers showing Megan's subsequent legal adoption by the Reynolds family. The network's attention to detail was impressive and slightly unsettling. The officer examined the documents, compared signatures, then nodded. Everything appears to be in order. Please follow me. They were escorted into a private viewing room after retrieving the box, a standard-size safety deposit box, unremarkable except for what it potentially contained. Ernest remained in the lobby, keeping watch, while mother and daughter sat across from each other at a small table, the metal container between them like a time capsule from another life. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she inserted the key and lifted the lid. Inside lay several folders, their edges yellowed with age, in a small leather pouch. She removed the contents, carefully, reverently spreading them across the table. Brian was methodical. Sarah's voice carried quiet pride. He documented everything. The first folder contained geological survey maps dated 1983 and 1984, with handwritten notations identifying mineral deposits across what had been Collins and Stewart land. Lithium was specifically highlighted in multiple locations with particular concentration on what was now Megan's 40 acres. The second folder held correspondence between Harold Pierce and various officials, county assessors, bank officers, the local judge, documenting what could only be described as a conspiracy to devalue Collins Stewart properties and force their sale. Several letters explicitly mentioned leveraging the Collins girls' situation to pressure Richard Collins into selling. They used my pregnancy as a weapon. Sarah's tone hardened. The scandal of an unmarried mother, the daughter of a respected local family, having an affair with a married man, it was the perfect leverage in a small conservative community. The third folder contained photographs: Harold Pierce meeting with Brian's father-in-law, Harold, consulting with what appeared to be mining engineers on Stewart property, Harold shaking hands with the county judge outside the courthouse. Each image was dated to locations noted in Brian's distinctive architectural block printing. But it was the contents of the leather pouch that proved most damning, a microcassette recorder surprisingly well preserved with a tape still inside. He recorded them. Megan realized, understanding dawning. That's why they killed him. He had actual audio evidence. Sarah nodded, handling the recorder like a live explosive. We need to get this digitized immediately. The tape has deteriorated over time, but forensic audio specialists can likely extract and enhance what's there. She carefully returned everything to the box except the recorder and one folder containing what appeared to be copies rather than originals. We'll leave the originals secure here. If anything happens to us, Ernest knows who to contact to retrieve them. The matter-of-fact reference to their potential elimination sent a chill through Megan. This wasn't a movie or novel. The danger was real, demonstrated by Brian's fate 40 years earlier. As they exited the bank, Ernest fell into step beside them, his posture casual, but eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Everything in order. Better than we hoped. Sarah kept her voice low, despite the busy sidewalk. Brian had audio recordings. We need to get them to Frank's son. He has a media digitization business with forensic capabilities. Ernest nodded, guiding them toward a coffee shop rather than directly back to the parking garage. Change of plans. I just got word from Joseph. There's activity at Megan's place. 3 vehicles arrived about an hour ago, men in suits carrying equipment. What kind of equipment? Sarah's voice sharpened. Joseph couldn't tell from his position, but it looked professional. Survey equipment, maybe, or something more concerning. Megan's thoughts flew immediately to Lily. I need to call Martha, make sure everything's okay at the house. Already did, Ernest reassured her. Everything's fine. They're baking pies and watching old movies. Martha has 3 network members there now, just as precaution. They ordered coffee, the mundane transaction providing cover for their increasingly tense discussion. Sarah spread a city map on the table marking their current location and Frank Jr.'s business address. We separate here, she decided. Ernest, take the recorder directly to Frank. Tell him we need it processed immediately, expenses no object. Megan and I will retrieve the car and meet you there afterward. Ernest frowned. Splitting up increases vulnerability. It also reduces the chance of losing everything if we're intercepted, Sarah countered. 40 years of caution doesn't disappear overnight, old friend. Something in her tone, perhaps the reference to their long history, convinced Ernest. He nodded reluctantly, accepting the pouch containing the recorder. 2 hours. If you're not at Frank's by then, I implement emergency protocols. The calm reference to emergency protocols reinforced for Megan that this network operated with contingencies for worst-case scenarios. What had seemed paranoid yesterday now felt like necessary prudence. After Ernest departed, Sarah led Megan through a circuitous route back toward the parking garage, doubling back twice and entering a department store to walk through and exit on another street. The evasion techniques would have seemed comical in any other context, but Megan found herself scanning faces, noting anyone who appeared to linger too long or change direction when they did. Is this really necessary? Megan asked as they paused in the cosmetics section, Sarah pretending to test perfumes while actually watching the store entrance through the security mirror. Probably not, Sarah admitted. But habits formed over decades die hard. Alexander Pierce wouldn't hesitate to hire professionals to recover what we took from that safety deposit box. The contents could potentially cost his company billions. They resumed walking, moving through the store's rear exit into an alley that connected to the next block. As they turned the corner toward the parking garage, a black sedan pulled smoothly to the curb ahead of them. Keep walking, Sarah murmured. Don't change pace. Megan fought the instinct to freeze as two men emerged from the sedan, both wearing suits despite the summer heat, both moving with the purposeful confidence of those accustomed to intimidating others. Ms. Collins, the taller man called, using Sarah's original name with deliberate emphasis. Mr. Pierce would appreciate a few minutes of your time. Sarah continued walking, her stride unhurried but determined. I'm afraid you have me confused with someone else. My name is Anderson. The men moved to block their path, positioning themselves between the women and the parking garage entrance. Sarah Collins Anderson, the second man clarified, and Megan Collins Reynolds. No confusion, Mr. Pierce is waiting in the car. He prefers to discuss business privately rather than creating a public scene. The implied threat hung in the air between them. Megan glanced around, noting the busy street just yards away, people passing oblivious to the confrontation unfolding. Help was theoretically close but practically unreachable. We have nothing to discuss with Alexander Pierce. Sarah's voice remained steady, though Megan detected the tension coiled beneath her mother's calm exterior. Please step aside. The first man smiled without warmth. I'm afraid Mr. Pierce insists. He's very interested in discussing certain items recently removed from a safety deposit box. How did he? Megan began before catching herself. Banking institutions have surveillance systems. The man replied, correctly interpreting her unfinished question. And Mr. Pierce has many long-standing relationships in the financial sector. Now, shall we? He gestured toward the sedan with exaggerated courtesy. Sarah seemed to consider their options, then nodded fractionally. 5 minutes, on the sidewalk in public view. Not in the car. The men exchanged glances before the taller one spoke into his wrist microphone. After a moment, the sedan's rear door opened and Alexander Pierce emerged. In person, he exuded the same confident authority Megan had glimpsed in the moonlight at her farm, now enhanced by an impeccably tailored suit and the assessing gaze of a man accustomed to measuring others' value to his purposes. He approached with the relaxed stride of someone who rarely encountered resistance. Ms. Anderson, he acknowledged Sarah with a slight nod. Or do you prefer Collins? It's been so long since anyone's addressed you properly, I wonder if you still answer to your real name. What do you want, Alexander? Sarah's tone dispensed with pretense, acknowledging their shared history and mutual recognition. Direct as always. Pierce smiled thinly. What I want is simple, the contents of the safety deposit box you just accessed, plus any other materials you may have recovered from the Collins property. In exchange, I'm prepared to be generous. Generous how? Megan found herself asking, curiosity temporarily overriding caution. Pierce turned his attention to her eyes, calculating. $5 million, tax-free offshore if you prefer, plus guaranteed mineral rights royalties of 2% on any extraction from your 40 acres. You'd be set for life, Ms. Reynolds. Your daughter's education secured through graduate school, if she's so inclined. The casualness with which he mentioned Lily sent ice through Megan's veins. You know about my daughter. I make it my business to know about potential business partners, Pierce replied smoothly. Lily seems like a delightful child. Martha Morgan is teaching her to bake blackberry pies today, I understand. Such wholesome activities should be encouraged. The implicit threat behind his knowledge was unmistakable. Sarah stepped forward, inserting herself partially between Pierce and Megan. You haven't changed at all, have you? Still hiding threats behind corporate pleasantries just like your father? On the contrary, I've evolved considerably beyond my father's methods. Pierce's smile never reached his eyes. Harold was unnecessarily dramatic. I prefer clean professional solutions, like the one I'm offering now. We're not interested, Sarah's voice carried decades of accumulated resolve. The evidence Brian Stewart gathered proves your family committed fraud, conspiracy, and likely murder. Evidence that's already been duplicated and secured with multiple parties. Pierce's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his gaze. Murder is a serious allegation, Ms. Collins. One might even call it slander, without proper evidence. The evidence exists, Sarah countered, currently being digitized and enhanced by forensic audio specialists as we speak. Brian recorded your father's conversations, including explicit discussions of sabotaging our property to force sales and threats to our families if we didn't cooperate. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Pierce's composed features. Audio deteriorates significantly over 40 years, particularly magnetic tape. It would never be admissible. In court, perhaps not, Sarah agreed. But in the court of public opinion, in the media before regulatory agencies considering your mining permits, the narrative of a powerful family systematically destroying small ranchers to access mineral deposits they knew existed, that plays remarkably well in today's environment. Pierce considered this, his calculation almost visible behind his eyes. $10 million. Final offer, plus signed non-disclosure agreements and your promise to leave Wyoming permanently. This isn't about money, Megan found her voice anger overriding intimidation. This is about justice for my father, for my mother, for 40 years of separation and lies. Noble sentiments. Pierce's tone suggested he found such principles quaint rather than compelling. But consider the practical reality. Even with your evidence, legal proceedings would take years. Appeals could extend well beyond your lifetime. Meanwhile, your charming property would remain in limbo, its value unrealized. Your daughter would grow up under the shadow of protracted litigation. He stepped closer, lowering his voice confidentially. I'm offering certainty, immediate financial security, a clean break from a painful past. Isn't that what you came to Wyoming, seeking Ms. Reynolds, a fresh start? The offer was designed to divide them, appealing to Megan's practical concerns as a single mother, while undermining Sarah's 4-decade quest for justice. For a moment, Megan understood the insidious effectiveness of Pierce's methods. No overt threats, just reasonable-sounding propositions backed by implicit consequences for refusal. My fresh start includes my mother, Megan replied, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with Sarah. In honoring my father's memory, you can keep your millions. Pierce sighed the sound, carrying a theatrical disappointment rather than genuine surprise. As you wish. But remember, I tried to resolve this amicably. He handed Megan a business card. When you reconsider, call that number. Direct line answered any time. The offer expires at midnight tomorrow. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ms. Collins, you might want to check on your friend Ernest. Traffic cameras caught him running a red light near Colfax Avenue about 20 minutes ago. Seemed to be in quite a hurry. With that parting comment, Pierce returned to his sedan, his associates following. The vehicle pulled smoothly into traffic, leaving Sarah and Megan standing on the sidewalk, the encounter's menace lingering like smoke. He knows about Ernest taking the recorder. Sarah's voice was tight with renewed urgency. We need to move now. They abandoned caution for speed, hurrying directly to the parking garage and retrieving Ernest's truck. Sarah drove, navigating Denver's streets with unexpected familiarity, taking turns aggressively enough to force Megan to brace against the dashboard. How does Pierce know so much? Megan asked as they sped across town toward Frank Jr.'s business address. About Lily baking with Martha, about Ernest's route. The network has been compromised. Sarah's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Possibly Joseph, he was at both locations and knew our plans. Or someone close to Ernest. Pierce mentioned traffic cameras, but those records aren't instantly accessible without inside connections in law enforcement. The implications chilled Megan to the bone. If Pierce had infiltrated the network that had protected Sarah for 40 years, nowhere was truly safe. Frank's audio restoration occupied a nondescript commercial building in Denver's industrial district. As they pulled into the lot, Megan immediately noted the absence of Ernest's truck. The business appeared open, lights visible through tinted windows, but something about the quiet parking area triggered alarm bells. "Something's wrong," Sarah murmured, echoing Megan's thoughts. She parked but left the engine running. "Stay here while I check." "No." Megan caught her mother's arm. "We stay together. Pierce's men could be watching, waiting to separate us." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Use your phone. Call Ernest first, then Frank's business number." Megan tried Ernest's number, stomach tightening when it went straight to voicemail. The call to Frank's business rang several times before being answered by an unfamiliar male voice. Frank's audio. "How can I help you?" "I'm looking for Ernest Morgan." Megan kept her tone casual despite her racing heart. "He was supposed to meet us there." A slight pause. "No Ernest Morgan here. You must have the wrong address." "Is Frank available?" Megan pressed instinct, telling her something was off. "Stepped out for lunch. Want to leave a message?" The voice remained professional but somehow flat rehearsed. Sarah gestured for Megan to hang up. "Pierce's people," she whispered once the call ended. Frank would never leave during a business day without setting his answering service. And the man who answered didn't ask for your name or number. "What about Ernest?" Fear clutched at Megan's throat. "And the recorder. Emergency protocols." Sarah's expression hardened with resolve. If Ernest suspected trouble, he wouldn't have entered the building. He would have implemented our contingency plan. She put the truck in reverse, backing out of the parking space. "We need to get somewhere safe, regroup, and contact other network members. If Pierce has compromised some of our people, we need to identify who remains trustworthy." As they pulled away from Frank's business, Megan noticed a black sedan similar to Pierce's turning into the lot behind them. "We're being followed." "Not for long," Sarah's voice carried grim determination as she accelerated, cutting across lanes to make a sudden turn. The next 20 minutes became a masterclass in evasion techniques, Sarah navigating a complex route through Denver's neighborhoods, doubling back, using parking garages to change direction, and eventually merging onto the interstate heading north. "Where are we going?" Megan asked once it became apparent they'd lost their tail. "Safe house in Boulder," Sarah replied, eyes constantly checking the mirrors. "Maintained by network members Pierce doesn't know about. We need to contact Martha, make sure Lily's secure." Megan's phone showed no service, whether from the mountainous terrain or deliberate interference she couldn't tell. The thought of her daughter potentially in danger while she was unable to even call sent panic rising in her chest. "Martha has protocols too." Sarah seemed to read her thoughts. "If she suspects any threat to Lily, she'll move her immediately to another secure location. The network has multiple fallback positions." The drive to Boulder took nearly an hour, Sarah maintaining a careful balance between speed and caution. The safe house proved to be an ordinary-looking craftsman bungalow on a quiet residential street indistinguishable from its neighbors, except for subtle security features. Megan wouldn't have noticed without Sarah pointing them out. Cameras disguised as outdoor lighting fixtures, reinforced window frames, a side entrance with a particularly robust door. Sarah used a key from her ever-present bag to enter through this side door, quickly disarming the security system with a code. The interior was simply but comfortably furnished with the anonymous feel of a well-maintained rental property. "Check for reception," Sarah instructed, moving directly to a bookshelf that concealed a hidden panel. From this compartment, she extracted a satellite phone. "I'll try to reach Ernest through secure channels." Megan found her cell phone now had signal, though weak. She immediately called Martha's number, relief washing over her when the older woman answered on the second ring. "We're fine," Martha assured her before Megan could even ask. "Ernest contacted us about the situation. We've moved to location 3 with Lily and Scout. She thinks it's an adventure, a treasure hunt game." "Thank God." Megan's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Is she okay? Can I speak to her?" "She's helping gather eggs at the moment. I can have her call you back in 10 minutes. Are you and Sarah safe?" For now, Megan glanced at her mother, who was speaking in low, urgent tones on the satellite phone. "We're at the Boulder location. Have you heard from Ernest directly? Not since his initial alert. Martha's voice carried concern beneath her calm exterior. That's not necessarily worrying. Protocol dictates minimal communication during active threat scenarios. The careful language reinforced for Megan how thoroughly her life had changed in just 3 days, from marketing professional and single mother to participant in what felt increasingly like a spy thriller, complete with safe houses and emergency protocols. Sarah ended her call expression grim. Ernest never reached Frank's. He spotted surveillance and implemented diversion procedures. He's safe but had to abandon the truck and the recorder. The loss of the critical evidence hit Megan like a physical blow. Pierce has the recordings. Not yet. Sarah's tone held surprising confidence. Ernest created a decoy package before he left the bank, similar size and weight to the recorder pouch. He switched them when he spotted the tail left the real recorder with a trusted contact. Classic misdirection. So the evidence is safe. Hope flickered through Megan's exhaustion. For now, but we need to move quickly. Pierce will realize he has a decoy soon if he hasn't already. And with part of our network compromised, our window of security is limited. Sarah unfolded a detailed map of Wyoming on the small dining table. Pierce's people are at your property right now, which suggests he's accelerating his timeline, probably attempting to establish possession before we can mobilize our evidence. What do we do? Megan felt overwhelmed by the chess game they'd been thrust into, where the stakes included not just property and money, but potentially their lives. We need to reestablish control of your property immediately. Sarah tapped a finger on the map where Megan's 40 acres lay. Wyoming adverse possession laws are relatively favorable to the original deed holder, but only if we can prove continuous intent to occupy. If Pierce's people establish unchallenged presence for even a few days, it complicates our legal position. So we go back. Megan stated the simplicity of the direct approach and appealing after hours of evasion and subterfuge. Yes, but not alone. Sarah reached for the satellite phone again. I'm calling in reinforcements, legitimate reinforcements. It's time to elevate this beyond Pierce's sphere of influence. While Sarah made calls, Megan finally spoke with Lily, her daughter's cheerful description of collecting eggs and helping feed horses, confirming Martha had indeed taken her to what sounded like a working ranch. The normality in Lily's voice provided an anchor amidst the chaos, a reminder of what Megan was fighting to protect. By evening, Sarah had assembled what she called their counterstrike team, a state environmental regulator, 2 deputies from a neighboring county outside Pierce's influence, and a reporter from the Denver Post who specialized in corporate accountability stories. Ernest remained unreachable, but had apparently sent word through secure channels that he would meet them at the Collins property the following morning with the recovered recorder and, critically, a digitized copy of its contents. We need to be on site when Pierce's people arrive tomorrow, Sarah explained as they reviewed the plan, with witnesses' evidence and legal representation. He's expecting us to hide to run. Instead, we're bringing the fight directly to his doorstep. The boldness of the strategy both terrified and exhilarated Megan. After days of reaction and retreat, they were seizing the initiative. Still, doubt nagged at her. What if Pierce escalates? He's already demonstrated he's willing to use intimidation. What's to stop him from using more direct methods? Sarah's expression darkened with memories. Pierce operates through proxies and plausible deniability. He'll threaten, manipulate, even sabotage, but always with layers of distance between himself and the actual dirty work. That's why we need witnesses and documentation. We remove his protection of deniability. They spent the night at the safe house, taking turns on watch, despite the security systems. Neither mother nor daughter could quite trust sleep with the stakes so high. In those quiet hours, they talked, really talked, filling in the gaps of their separate lives. Sarah shared stories of Megan's first weeks of life before the separation. Megan described growing up with Evelyn and David, her college years, her failed marriage, her hopes for Lily. I wish you could have known Brian, Sarah murmured as dawn approached. You have his determination, his sense of justice, and his smile, exactly his smile. I'm starting to know him through you. Megan replied, the connection to her biological father growing stronger with each story Sarah shared. And through what he left behind, not just evidence but purpose. He started this fight knowing he might not finish it, but believing it mattered anyway. Sarah reached across the small space between their chairs, clasping Megan's hand. He would be so proud of you, not just for continuing his fight, but for the woman you've become, the mother you are to Lily. That would have mattered to him more than any mineral, rights, or property. The moment of connection transcended the decades of separation, a bridge across time that allowed mother and daughter to recognize not just their physical similarities, but their shared values, their common core of resilience. They departed Boulder before sunrise, driving the replacement vehicle the network had provided, an unremarkable SUV with tinted windows and Wyoming plates. Sarah remained hypervigilant throughout the journey north, but they encountered no obvious surveillance or pursuit. By mid-morning, they were approaching Pine Ridge on the back roads, avoiding the main highway where they might be more easily spotted. Joseph texted. Megan checked her phone as they turned onto the county road leading to her property. Pierce's people are already on site. 4 vehicles, at least 8 men. They've set up some kind of equipment near the barn. Survey equipment, most likely. Sarah's jaw tightened. Establishing preliminary mining infrastructure to strengthen their claim of legitimate business activities. They stopped at a predetermined meeting point, a roadside scenic overlook 2 miles from the Collins property. The environmental regulator was already waiting, a middle-aged woman with practical hiking boots and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who regularly confronted corporate interests. The deputies arrived minutes later, followed by the reporter in a compact hybrid car emblazoned with Denver Post insignia. "Where's Ernest?" Megan scanned the gathering, anxiety spiking when she didn't spot the familiar silver-haired figure. As if in answer, a truck appeared on the horizon, dust billowing behind it as it approached at considerable speed. Ernest pulled to a stop beside them, looking disheveled but triumphant as he emerged from the vehicle. "Mission accomplished," he announced without preamble, producing a flash drive from his pocket. Fully digitized, enhanced, and verified by Frank's colleague in Boulder. Pierce's men got the empty pouch from Frank's office, but they never had the recorder. Sarah accepted the drive with the reverence of one handling a religious relic. And the original? Secured in 3 separate locations as backups, Ernest confirmed, plus copies with trusted legal contacts who will release them to authorities and media if anything happens to us. The thoroughness of these precautions emphasized the stakes for which they were playing. This wasn't just about Megan's 40 acres anymore. It was about exposing decades of corporate corruption that had destroyed families and communities. With their team assembled, they proceeded toward the Collins property in a small convoy, the official vehicles of the environmental regulator and deputies leading the way. As they approached the farm's entrance, they could see activity around the barn, men in hard hats moving between equipment, temporary floodlights set up despite the daylight, the unmistakable profile of Alexander Pierce supervising from beside a black SUV. Their arrival created immediate disruption. The deputies pulled directly into the driveway, blocking the path of a truck that appeared to be departing. The environmental regulator positioned her vehicle across the entrance to the barn area, effectively cutting off access to whatever operation was underway inside. Pierce's reaction was visible even from a distance. First surprise, then calculation. Finally, a mask of corporate composure as he straightened his tie and began walking toward the new arrivals. "This is private property," he called as they exited their vehicles. "You're trespassing on a legitimate business operation." Actually, Megan stepped forward, the mineral rights agreement in hand. "This is my property, and you're conducting unauthorized activities without the property owner's consent." The environmental regulator moved to Megan's side badge, prominently displayed. Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. "We've received reports of unauthorized ground disturbance and potential contamination activities at this location. All operations are suspended pending full environmental review." Pierce's confident facade cracked slightly as he assessed the official presence. "We have the necessary permits for preliminary geological assessment." "Not on this parcel," Sarah interrupted, stepping forward with the documentation they'd recovered. "The mineral rights for this property are subject to a prior agreement between the Collins and Stewart families that supersedes any subsequent transfers. As legal representative for both families, I am revoking any permission for exploration or development activities." Pierce's gaze locked onto Sarah, decades of enmity crystallized in that single look. "That agreement is nearly 50 years old and has no bearing on current operations. My legal team will be happy to clarify this for you in court. Court will certainly be involved. Ernest agreed, joining them with the flash drive now connected to a tablet, along with federal prosecutors once they hear this. He pressed play, and Brian Stewart's voice emerged from the device's speakers, young, determined, but unmistakably similar to the tone Sarah had described in her stories. The recording was scratchy with age, but clearly enhanced through modern technology, the words distinct despite background noise. Confirming again that you were aware of the lithium deposits before approaching either family about selling, Brian's voice asked. Of course we knew, Harold Pierce's voice replied, the arrogant confidence of wealth and power evident even across 4 decades. That's how business works, Stewart. We identify resources, acquire them at advantageous prices, develop them for profit. The fact that your father-in-law and Collins were too short-sighted to conduct their own surveys isn't my problem. And the accidents at both ranches, Brian pressed. The contaminated well water at Collins' place, the barn fire at mine, coincidences. A laugh chilling in its casualness. Let's call them business incentives. Sometimes people need motivation to make sensible decisions. Your father-in-law needed financial pressure. Collins needed scandal involving his precious daughter. Different leverage points, same result. The reporter had moved closer, recording the playback with professional interest while the deputies maintained positions, blocking Pierce's associates from approaching. Alexander himself stood frozen, hearing his father's voice confessing to crimes that could destroy the family empire he'd inherited and expanded. Turn that off, he demanded, voice tight with barely controlled fury. That recording is clearly manipulated, inadmissible in any court. Perhaps, Sarah conceded, but admissible in the court of public opinion, admissible before regulatory bodies considering your permit applications, admissible to shareholders questioning your corporate governance. She stepped closer, 4 decades of waiting for this moment evident in her controlled intensity. You have a choice, Alexander, the same choice your father never gave us. Walk away now, withdraw all personnel from this property, abandon your permit applications for this parcel, and publicly acknowledge the Collins Stewart Mineral Rights Agreement as valid. In exchange, we limit public disclosure to the specific facts relevant to this property dispute. And if I refuse, Pierce's tone suggested he wasn't accustomed to ultimatums, then by this time tomorrow, every news outlet in Wyoming and Colorado will have copies of these recordings, along with comprehensive documentation of your family's systematic destruction of ranching families to acquire mineral rights. The full 40-year history from your father's original tactics to your own contemporary methods. Sarah's voice never wavered. Your choice, your legacy. For several long moments, Pierce stood, a mobile calculation visible in his eyes as he weighed options, consequences, probabilities. The deputies had positioned themselves to block access to vehicles. The reporter continued recording. The environmental regulator was already photographing the equipment set up near the barn, documenting potential violations. You've prepared well. Pierce finally acknowledged, his tone suggesting reluctant professional respect. But this isn't over. Legal challenges can continue for years. Appeals can extend beyond your lifetime. Probably. Megan stepped forward to stand beside her mother, the physical resemblance between them suddenly striking in the morning light. But we have something your family has always underestimated: patience. Brian Stewart started this fight knowing he might not live to finish it. Sarah Collins continued it for 40 years from exile, and I'm prepared to see it through for my daughter's generation if necessary. Something shifted in Pierce's expression, not surrender exactly, but recognition that the careful control he'd maintained over this situation had irreversibly slipped. 24 hours to consider your proposal, he countered. My legal team needs to review the implications. 12 hours, Sarah replied firmly. By sunset today, and your people leave now, all of them, all equipment, or the recordings go public immediately. Pierce studied her for a moment longer, then nodded curtly to his associates. Pack it up. We're done for today. The activity around the barn shifted from installation to dismantling, workers quickly loading equipment back onto trucks under the watchful eyes of the deputies and environmental regulator. Pierce himself remained beside his vehicle, phone to ear, presumably consulting with legal advisors about their limited options. As Pierce's convoy finally departed, dust billowing behind their vehicles, Megan felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Not complete resolution, but the first true victory in a battle that had begun before she was born. She turned to find Sarah gazing at the barn emotion playing across features usually kept carefully controlled. He built this, Sarah said softly. Brian designed it, worked alongside the carpenters. Said it would be the heart of our future together, my pottery studio, his workshop, eventually a place for children to play on rainy days. He poured so much hope into these walls. Megan moved to stand beside her mother, seeing the weathered structure through new eyes, not just as a potential workspace for her own artistic revival, but as the physical manifestation of her parents' dreams violently interrupted, but never completely extinguished. It will be that again, Megan promised, taking her mother's hand. Different than they planned, delayed by decades, but still a place of creation and family. That's how we honor them both, by building the future they couldn't have together. Sarah's fingers tightened around Megan's, the connection between them strengthened by shared purpose and newfound understanding. Brian used to say that justice moves at its own pace, sometimes glacially slow, sometimes lightning fast, but it always eventually arrives. As if summoned by the memory, another vehicle appeared on the horizon, Martha's station wagon, with Lily visible in the passenger seat and Scout's eager face pressed against the back window. The network had deemed it safe for them to return the immediate threat, neutralized by their counteroffensive. I need to call Frank, verify that the digital copies have been secured with our legal team, Ernest said, moving toward his truck to give mother and daughter privacy for the reunion to come. And contact network members about Joseph's apparent betrayal. We have cleanup to do. As Martha's car approached Lily, already waving excitedly through the window, Sarah squeezed Megan's hand one final time. Whatever Pierce decides, we've already won the most important battle. We're together. After 40 years, that's the victory that matters most. The station wagon pulled to a stop, and Lily burst from the passenger door, Scout bounding after her. Mother and daughter moved forward together to greet them, 3 generations of Collins women, finally united on the land that had witnessed both their separation and their reunion. Behind them, the red barn stood witness, weathered by time, but still standing like the truth it had protected for 40 years, waiting for the right moment to emerge into the light.